Okay, this is EHE for those watching us. It is a voting session. We're working from list number 4, I believe it is. We will come back to SB 15 when we're joined by representative from SVE to answer any questions. So let's go to SB 19, Senator Lamb, Ms. Foxworth.
Senate Bill 19, Pharmacies, Administration of Maintenance Injectable Medications, Treatment of Sexually Transmitted Infections. This bill expands the definition of the administration of a maintenance injectable medication to include treatment for sexually transmitted infections that are not vaccines for purposes of the scope of practices for the scope of practice for pharmacists. No opposition and no amendments.
I'll entertain a motion. It's been moved, it's been seconded, I thought I heard a second. Discussion. I don't believe there are amendments to this, is that right? Any discussion? Seeing none. Does anybody wish? Please.
Just for the record, there was unfavorable, I believe, on this from Funk and Bolton, just for the record.
Okay, the record's been cleared. Seeing no discussion, would anybody like to be recorded in the negative? If not, we'll record it as unanimous and sent to the floor as such. SB 19 passes to the floor. Let's go back to SB 15, Senator Jackson, Election Law, Campaign Finance Enforcement. Jared, can you hear us?
Yes, I can.
Great.
Can you hear me?
What?
I can hear you.
That's a joke. That's a joke. I'm sorry. Yes, we can. Ms. Goodman, you want to explain the bill, please?
Senate Bill 15, Election Law, Campaign Finance Enforcement. This bill increases the statute of limitations on election law violations from 3 years to 4 years. It authorizes the Office of State Prosecutor to issue a civil citation for late filings for the contribution disclosure statement from persons doing public business under Title 14, and just that means businesses that have government contracts of over $200,000. That is what Title 14 governs. It increases the monetary penalties for filers of contribution disclosure statement to $25,000 from $1,000 to mirror the penalty for criminal violation of Title 13. If you recall, Title 13 are campaign finance provisions related to candidates and political committees. It broadens the applicability of, adds record-keeping requirements to, and increases the amount of the fine for criminal violations from $1,000 to $25,000, and authorizes the State Board of Elections to impose civil penalties for specified violations under provisions requiring disclosure of contributions by persons providing compensation to lobbyists. Senator Ellis has provided one amendment, and it's standalone from the packet. His name is at the top. What Senator Ellis's amendment does is it decreases the statute of limitations on election law violations from 3 years to 1 year. It authorizes the State Board of Elections, instead of the state prosecutor, to issue a civil citation for late filings for the contribution disclosure statement for persons doing public business under Title 14. It removes all the provisions related to civil enforcement by the state prosecutor. Monetary penalty for violations of Title 14 is set at a maximum of $1,000. It removes the criminal penalty for individuals who willfully submit a false or misleading statement under Title 14. It strikes provisions that would have authorized the state prosecutor to double fines under certain circumstances. It strikes provisions requiring a defendant to be liable for proceedings costs in district court. And it strikes provisions authorizing a district court to place a certain defendant on probation before judgment.
Let's start with putting something before us. Is there a motion on the bill as submitted? It's been moved. I assume that's a favorable. I assume. I don't want to assume wrong. Is there a second on the bill? I'll say, okay. Okay, the bill's before us. And I believe Senator Ellis wants to proffer an amendment, I assume. Is there a motion?
Amend the bill as described by council.
Is there a second? Discussion on the amendment. Senator, you want to start?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. So, I know folks who willfully violate a lot of election laws now, they are treated with jail time. I know we have folks who've just came out of prison for violations of election laws, former delegates, I believe. And so I believe the mechanism is there to deal with violations of willful violations. In those cases, people have pleaded guilty, so obvious. I believe that if we take so much more of the election laws and criminalize it, brings in the state prosecutor, it will, I believe, dissuade a lot of folks from even running from office, because citizen legislator is basically populated by regular citizens until we get here. I guess we're not regular anymore. but you know, we were regular before we ran for office. And a lot of folks who run for office, they bring in their family members to be treasurers, non-professionals. And so I think when we up fines and we criminalize things, then it just kind of sends a bad message to folks that, you know what, you have to be rich, you have to be a professional, you have to be able to hire a good team of folks to keep you out of trouble. Because so many times, with so many people, the benefit of doubt is not given to them when they make a mistake. And so, you know, knowing that, you know, just in recent years, last 4 years, we've had quite a few members of General Assembly who've really stepped over the line with campaign funds. I mean, they were caught and they were dealt with in the manner that, you know, was, how should I say, just, in that they pleaded guilty and they served time. I think just up in fines. And, you know, and then you look at the bill, it talks about increasing fines up to $25,000, increasing fines $10,000. And individuals paying court costs, folks paying court costs also. It's just a pile on, and I think it's so much that even though some provisions does not apply to individuals, but it just gives a message that, you know, we are criminalizing these activities, and if mistakes are made and folks will not give you the benefit of the doubt, then it is an issue. And also, you know, I have trouble with the bill in that it empowers the state prosecutor. Now, the state prosecutor is a governor's appointee. It's a political appointee from the governor. And so, you know, I'm not saying anything about this current prosecutor, but, you know, we're saying that these decisions, when we bring in the state prosecutor into campaign finance issues on a huge way, it increased the opportunity for just a lot of interference in what is we have now as a citizen legislator. So I spent a lot of time going through this bill, speaking to some of my colleagues about some of these issues, and these are some of the amendments which we talked about. And so I would just love to present this, and love, that's a bad word, but would love to present this and ask for support for these amendments.
Senator, let me ask a question. Do you want to? It's my understanding, and correct me if I'm wrong, that this only pertains to businesses that have contracts over $200,000 with the state of Maryland. And as I understand it, and I could be wrong here, they are required to submit a list of their contributions so the public would know that it's not a quid pro quo. I mean, it would be transparent if they are giving contributions to elected officials, and that these kind of processes are if they don't comply. In other words, if they submit the right forms and they say, yeah, I gave to this person, this person, I got a contract, I don't think there's any relationship, I didn't lobby for it, we were the best bid, blah, blah, blah. But if we don't know that they're giving $5,000, $10,000 or having 6 board of directors, each giving $5,000 below the $6,000 threshold and getting a contract, it might start to look fishy to the public and to us, actually. I guess I see this, again, correct me if I'm wrong, this is on the businesses that could potentially take advantage of the state processes. It doesn't reflect on us. And in fact, if we don't know this information, it might reflect worse. So if you have a different read of this, please, you can just wave your arms. Okay.
So, so from my perspective, Mr. Chairman, is businesses are made up of people too. You know, they're my neighbors, they're my friends. You know, they're contributors to all of us, right? And so I don't put them in just a different light. Oh, they're businesses, we don't worry about them. You know, and 200,000 threshold, that's very low for a business, right? That's a very low threshold. That's a small business, really. I mean, gross revenues, if you think about that.
It's a contract. That's the contract with the state has to
Right.
be over 200,000.
Right, yeah, that's what.
Not the gross receipts.
Well, I mean, for some businesses I know, you know, they have 1 or 2 contracts, you know, and that's, you know, that's their level. And they're small businesses really struggling, our neighbors. And so that's a low, but this amendment doesn't take out the reporting requirements. They still have to report. It's just how, when we have to deal with issues, this amendment doesn't take it to the prosecutor level. So they still have to report. And just, you know, and the thing is, if we overblow this, then, how should I say, if the charges are filed, it blows back on the members, okay? I know of one individual was accused of, you know, doing stuff to donors to his campaign projects, and it was a false accusation. Imagine, you know, that blows up, and, you know, it just have to go to the prosecutor, and, you know, then it's bigger news, and, you know, it's just really, it blows back on the members, I do believe, also. And so the thing is, they still have a reporting requirement, I believe. This amendment doesn't take out the reporting requirement, but just basically how, and it doesn't take away the state board's ability to deal with it, but it just doesn't escalate it to the prosecutor level, to the courts, where that small business with $200,000 contract will have to pick up legal fees, fines up to $25,000. You know, that's very much a hard hit on our citizens.
I had Senator Washington followed by Senator Lamb. Let me know.
Thank you. I want to speak generally to the intent of the amendments. I don't agree. I wish this was broken into different ones. But if I just look at the beginning, and I guess, Jared, you should tell me, in the beginning of the bill, it looks like you are talking about candidates and having the ability to have a civil penalty. And if you have a civil penalty, it's just basically corresponding to what you already have. So in 13-332, there is a section A that talks about not being able, if you didn't file, and then the section B is ascribing a civil penalty. Is that correct?
So,
So
yes,
if you're
so
on page-
current,
On
was that to
page
me?
3.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, yeah. So on page 3 of the bill, lines 14 through 18, you're adding a civil penalty for violating what's between 8 and 11. Is that correct?
So, right. Mr. Chair, did you want me to answer that, or?
Yeah, that's why he's here. That's why you're here.
Okay, I'm sorry. It's a little hard sometimes to hear for this.
Oh, sorry. I'll try.
Right. So, no, so a candidate, currently, a candidate or an individual who has won election cannot, a person cannot be a candidate or assume office if that individual has failed to file a campaign finance report or owes late fees
Right.
for that.
Right.
And so this would, basically, it was when the law was passed, it was supposed to be bad actors should not be candidates or assume office, that when they become a candidate or assume office, they're in good standing with the State Board of Elections and have fulfilled all their disclosure and all their other requirements with the election law article. This then just, in 2013, we added civil citation authority to the State Board for enumerated offenses. So this just basically is making sure that the intent that bad actors cannot be candidates or assume office, so that only people in good standing with the State Board of Elections and that have fulfilled all their disclosure requirements and paid all their late fees and made sure that all their campaign material has authority lines on it can be a candidate and or assume office.
Right, so just the part I'm trying to understand is, which is what I said, I thought, is that it's assessing a civil penalty for the violation in Section A. I just want to understand what we're doing, right? So the first one says you can't be a candidate, right? So lines 8 through 11, right? And it talks about the late fee, but B is now talking about the civil penalties, right?
Right. So
Okay.
right. So basically, it's about paying, failing to file a campaign finance report,
Right.
and when that law was passed,
Yes.
civil penalties weren't in existence.
Right,
So this
so this-
just basically moves it up so that it's with the intent, which is basically saying everyone who has, who's basically in the arena, the political, as a candidate. So when you go through the entire process from being a candidate to assuming office, you have complied with all the laws that the state has asked you to comply with.
Right, okay. You made it hard. I was just agreeing with you that what I said was that you're adding civil penalties. So I think that was just a yes. And,
Yes, sorry, yes, right, sorry. I made a longer explanation, sorry.
okay, thank you. I guess
but-
why I'm trying to get clarity is to understand the amendments. I'm trying to understand
But the
what
amendment
they're
doesn't
trying to-
touch this.
That's what I'm trying to understand, whether your questions were related to the amendment or the bill.
I'm trying to establish the part of the bill, I was trying to understand the intent of the bill, right? So that I can understand what these amendments have to do with the intent of establishing the ability to enact civil penalties. That's what I'm trying to understand. So in my mind, I guess I'll go to the amendments. In my mind, and I guess I could ask if the bill sponsors were, but I guess they're not, he's not here, that I don't understand what provisions, the new 14-108, all the way through, have to do with us having the power to assess a civil penalty and to keep someone from running for office if they don't pay a civil penalty. I see 3 pages of
I can answer that if you want.
overreach,
Yeah,
frankly.
This is
I
critical
think
bill.
they're two distinct issues. And Jared, the question very explicitly, does 14108 have any relationship to 13332?
No.
Okay,
They're two different things. And if you look at it says the pay the civil penalty under 13.6, it's specific what civil penalties. So Title 14 is a completely different section, and it does not deal with candidate civil penalties or any penalties assessed against campaigns.
and
It's
let's.
only against
and let's
businesses that have contracts of $200,000 or more.
Okay, and let's briefly summarize what you intend to do with 14108, and then that might give context to the amendment. Senator Washington, is that
Sure.
what you were?
So, in the intent of 14108 is to mirror what there is a provision already in Title 13, which is allowing the state prosecutor's office to seek civil penalties for violations of the entire article. This is the same. This was not included in the Title 14 provisions, which is going after businesses that have contracts of $200,000 or more. It is to expressly authorize them to seek civil penalties rather than to seek criminal penalties against these businesses. And this helps with our enforcement of late fees when these businesses fail to file their contribution disclosure statements. So that's the provision that the state prosecutor needs to go after and to enforce the civil penalties that I've imposed on them to the courts. So that's what is needed to basically close the loop on them not filing contribution disclosure statements.
So just clarity, and I'll send it back. State prosecutors already have this authority under Title 13, and you want to make sure they also have it for these bigger businesses.
Yes,
Okay.
exactly.
Back to Senator
Thank you.
Washington.
So in the provision right before, it talks about an officer or a business entity who knowingly authorizes, right? So D and E has been taken out. Is it put someplace else? So I'm on page 6 now, lines 3 through 8. It talks about a person, and then it talks about partners and businesses. And why I ask is that, Mr. Chair, 14-108 says a person. So that's what I need to understand, because you're saying it's businesses, and this references persons throughout.
So in drafting, the convention is a person means an individual or an entity. So whenever you see that, that's what you're talking about. When we reference just people as in human beings, that's an individual. When you talk about a business, when you talk about an organization, when you talk about a school or whatever, those are entities or businesses, and so they're called persons for ease in drafting.
I see.
Sure, thank you, Mr. Chair. I remember seeing parts of this in, I think, a bill that either had the floor lead or something in the past in prior years, so I have some familiarity with this. I think to the earlier point, it is right that the Office of the State Prosecutor, who I think requested some of these provisions, did not have the ability to go after businesses that were willfully violating campaign finance laws. And that's why this was all added in as part of the original bill. And I think my concern is that, I think they do need the authority to do this, because my understanding from having been in touch with the Office of the State Prosecutor in prior years for, bills passed or bills in the past, not necessarily passed, but bills that were in the past, that they were concerned that these businesses were viewing this as just the cost of doing business, right? That they were having these state contracts, and they were willfully not reporting what they needed to report to the state board or to other entities, and they were just absorbing these hits, right? So I have a $5 million contract, so I'm being, fined $1,000 or something. It's just kind of pennies on the contract, right? And so without some teeth to be able to go after them, which is what I think the state prosecutor's office is asking for here, there's really no real enforcement of these violations that can take place for the businesses, and they can just view this as the cost of doing business. I think for the other provisions in, the 13 paragraph.
Hold on, now let's keep it on the amendment,
Okay.
because the amendment doesn't deal with 13.
Well, the amendment deals with, it changes the penalty in parts of 13 also from 500 to 1,000.
Where?
I think on page 5. Oh, that's the bill.
That's the
All right.
bill.
I apologize.
It'll be underlined. Anything in the amendment is underlined.
Or interlined.
Okay. And then to the amendment then. This is actually what the state prosecutor's office does. The state prosecutor's office was set up to investigate cases that are more politically fraught or that involve elected officials for this very reason. And that was the mission of the state prosecutor's office, so that they can, review these and decide whether they should be pursued or not from a more removed office than, say, the Attorney General or a state's attorney's office, which is an elected position, because the state prosecutor's office is an appointed one. So, I think for those reasons, I have reservations about just removing all of this.
Let me go to the vice chair and then back to Senator Washington. Do me a favor, everyone, lean into your mic so we can make sure that Jared can hear our comments. Vice Chair and then Senator Washington.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I was actually on the same lines as Senator Lamb. On page 6, colleagues, starting on line 17, shifting from the state prosecutor to the board as this amendment proposes, is there any other enforcement responsibility that we give to the state Board of Elections members, the majority of which are appointed by the governor and reflective of the governor's party? Because it seems to me like I would be worried about whether there's a gotcha of someone going after someone because I don't like their politics or anything like that. I'm wondering, does the SBE currently have any other enforcement responsibility on penalties and where to pay and how much and what the violations are and all that?
That's all with the state prosecutor's office. Even when we issue a civil citation, the state prosecutor's office is our attorney to enforce it. They're the agency that is best equipped to handle all that.
Thank you, Jared. And I'm just looking on the state prosecutor's website. It was established in 1976 by constitutional amendment, began operation 1977, and they can investigate on their own initiative or at the request of a bunch of different folks, including the State Board of Elections. And number one, their top one, is state election law violations on here. And then it goes to ethics and bribery and stuff like that. So I'm kind of comfortable keeping violations with the state prosecutor and not have it go to a political organization, even when they are totally well-intentioned board members. But I'd like the SBE to be focused on running our elections and not enforcing unpaid fines. So,
Okay.
thank you, Jared.
Okay. Let's go to Senator Washington, then let's see where we are on the amendment. And
First of all, thank you, because the person was very confusing, because the first part of the bill was talking about elected officials, and so all of that seemed to me, so out of context, so if there was one more paragraph above it that talked about that it was a business, so that definitely helps me. I guess my other question was, if this is just copying another section of code, is this verbatim just literally taking from one, so everything telling, how the person should be adjudicated, so everything is word for word? Okay, great.
Pasted from there and
Okay.
then put it over in Title 14.
Then, okay, thank you very much.
okay, unless people have outstanding questions, the amendment is before us. I see a hand going. Do you want to speak?
I heard counsel say that it was for ease of drafting that we use the word person. I mean, is it possible to substitute entity?
That changes the whole code. If you look, I mean, if you look earlier, under the section Senator Washington talked about, it in fact does say an individual. It's something we just have to learn in terms of the drafting, and they don't force to go through that drafting class as all new hires do. The people who are affected will know. I mean, so, anyway. Okay, the motion, the issue before us is the Ellis Amendment. Those who support the amendment signify by saying aye. Those opposed, nay. Nay. 0-2, I think that amendment goes down. Okay, back on the bill, discussion. Anything? Okay, then, Senator.
Sorry, I just had a quick question. Is the $25,000 that in line with fees that businesses of this size get in other cases?
That's, I think, can we give that to Jared? Jared, did you hear the question?
$25,000 is what you have as candidates for criminal offenses. So this mirrors that for the people that do business with the state, $25,000 penalties.
Thank you.
Is it up to or?
Up to $25,000.
Right, okay. Okay. Is anybody going to be voting against the bill? If not, we can do a roll call or hands. Okay, would anybody like to be recorded? I'm sorry, Senator Ellis.
And so, you know, this bill, it brings in individuals and it brings in persons. And for individuals, the first part of the bill, it goes from fines of $500 to $10,000, and that's first line. And so the thing is, I think that's kind of excessive. I mean, I think, Jared, correct me if I'm wrong, that first part where page 6, line 12, where the fine goes up to $10,000, is that directly for individuals or for persons, business entities?
That's for business entities.
Okay.
As I understand the first section, where you've got to pay any due civil penalties from the last 4 years where you didn't file reports to be a candidate, that goes up from 500 to 1,000, or that's?
Yes, so the civil penalties for campaigns now goes to 1,000, which is the same that a late fee is currently at. On page 6, the one that Senator Ellis was referencing here, the $10,000 for civil offenses, that's only for business entities. That is strictly in Title 14. So that's only for the businesses that it may not exceed up to $10,000 for businesses that have contracts of $200,000 or more.
Okay. I assume, anybody like to be recorded in the negative on this bill? Okay. I will assume everyone else is a positive, no abstention, so we'll be recorded as 10-1, Senator Ellis voting no. Okay, I think that's it for Mr. Demarinis. Thank you. Have a good evening, Jared.
Thank you, you too. Take care.
Let's go to SB 37. Ms. Foxworth.
Okay. Senate Bill 37, Health Occupation State Board of Massage Therapy Examiners requiring license to practice and other revisions. This bill requires all massage therapists to be licensed after November 1st, 2026, and removes the registration scheme on that date. It amends curriculum for licensing and registration to include hands-on instruction techniques, removes the requirement that higher education institutions be approved by the Maryland Higher Education Commission to qualify for licensing, permits a program of study to be accredited. It increases contact hour requirements for licensure, prohibits the board from issuing a first-time registration after October 1st, 2023, and adds a $50,000 civil penalty for violating the provisions. There's one sponsor amendment to change Institute of Higher Education, that phrase, to Institute of Post-Secondary Education for licensing purposes. It also reinstates the requirement that an institution, educational institution, be approved by Maryland Higher Education Commission for licensing.
Been moved and seconded. There's an amendment. Anybody object to the amendment? Seeing none, the amendment's adopted. The bill's amended. Discussion. Senator.
Just a question. I remember during the hearing, so just back up a little. So this is a transition. They have they have a two-tier system here where one's a registered and one's licensed, and one has to go through like a college degree and the other one has to just do the massage requirements. And so if I read the bill right, there's a transition period. And at the end of the transition period, the RMTs will be converted to LMPs.
Right.
And I heard during the testimony, and I went back and read it from the American Massage Therapy, it said, no RMP will be required to return to school or incur extra expenses to become an LMP in this process. And they started saying, tried to define what that meant. And there's a lot of RMPs out there currently. There's nothing in the bill that states that. It just says everything's going to be done in regulation. Is that correct?
The requirement to go back to school or to complete further education
The
requirements?
conversion process from one to the other, what the existing, I don't know if there's hundreds, thousands of them out there currently that have an RMP, and by 2026 or 23, I don't know which it is, 26 maybe, they're going to convert them, but there's nothing in the bill that says what they're going to have to do to be converted to that. There was testimony saying what that would be, but there's nothing in this bill, if I'm reading it right.
So, right, I think the intent is to make all of that pending upon regulations that are created by the board,
Okay.
if I'm understanding your question
Yeah.
correctly.
So, Mr. Chairman, if I could, and I don't know if I have to draft this, but I'm just taking the language from the testimony that's saying during the conversion process that no RMP will be required to return to school or incur extra expense to become an LMP in this process. Basically, it's a conversion process. You got 1,000 or more people out there. They're converting this, and they're just saying, give it to the board and they'll figure out how to do it. And no requirement specified in the bills how this conversion process is going to take place. So in other words, they graduated in a program, they're out there working now. This bill is going to say you can no longer be an RMP, and just trust us in the regulations how we're going to make that conversion process go. And it was publicly stated that it wouldn't be an expense to them. So I would like to see that in the bill.
Could you read what you're generally proposing? I mean, I know it's not the actual language.
Yeah, just what I read.
Whose amendment was that?
It was in the public testimony from the American Massage Therapy Association.
Okay.
And then I followed on questions during the hearing, and they basically said they might do it in a three-way thing and this and that, but they couldn't come up with a real specifics. And I'm not trying to do the specifics in this, but just put the requirement that they will not have to go back to school or get extra expenses. At least that's what their statement said.
The floor is open for either substance or process, how to handle this.
I mean, I can hold it and work with the sponsor if that's easier.
Let's do that.
Okay,
I
that's
think
fine.
we'd like to know exactly what we're addressing.
Sure.
Okay.
I'll get it for the next voting session.
Okay. 37 is a hold. Let's go to SB 62, please.
Senate Bill 62, Pharmacists Aid for the Cessation of Tobacco Product Use. This bill expands the scope of pharmacy by permitting pharmacists to prescribe and dispense FDA-approved nicotine replacement therapy medications, so long as board regulations are met, requires these particular regulations to be adopted by September 1st, 2023, for the prescribing and dispensing of nicotine replacement therapy. The regulations explicitly have to require pharmacists to complete a training program on tobacco cessation aids, to refer a patient to a healthcare provider for follow-up, to explain the importance of follow-up, and to record the prescription. There are no amendments.
Bill's been moved and seconded. It's open for amendments or discussion. Seeing no hands, I'll assume we're ready for vote. Anybody want to be recorded in the opposition to a favorable? Seeing none, the bill will go to the floor, 11-0.
Finance, goes to finance.
I'm sorry, it will be sent up and over to finance, or over to, yeah, up and over.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Let's go to 67.
Yeah, probably. Thank you. All right, Senate Bill 67, Animal Welfare Declawing Cats Prohibited Acts. This bill prohibits a person from performing a declawing procedure on a cat unless the person is a veterinary practitioner, licensed and registered veterinarian, and the procedure is necessary for a therapeutic purpose. The bill establishes sanctions specific to veterinarians and veterinary practitioners that violate the prohibition and a civil fine applicable to any person who violates the prohibition. There is an amendment in your bill packet on page 4 being offered by Senator Kagan. The amendment strikes language that would require the vet board to suspend or revoke the license of a veterinary practitioner who fails to comply with the bill's prohibition, and instead authorizes the board to suspend or revoke a license in cases where a veterinary practitioner willfully violates the prohibition.
Okay, the bill has been moved and seconded. That was on the bill? Yes, it was. Okay, is there a motion on the amendment to put it before us? It's been moved, it's been seconded. Okay, the amendment is in front of us for discussion. Any questions or debate on the amendment? I'm doing it. What page is it on? I'm sorry.
Page 4.
And then the bill starts on page 5.
I'm looking at the numbers at the top instead of the bottom. Okay, yes, Senator.
The amendment narrows the bill down a little bit. Our idea is not to punish veterinarians. I don't want to sit there and envision a veterinarian who, in good faith, believes that this cat, had a tumor and they deknuckled or declawed that one cat, and I don't want any risk of having a hearing or a license or a probation or anything. So it's really mass disregard for the law. And it's so willfully, it also leaves the option to the board, and it says may and not shall. So we're just gentling that bill down a little bit, but still making clear that in Maryland, we should not be deknuckling or declawing our cats.
Please, Senator Simon Ayer on the amendment.
Maybe it's not the amendment, maybe it's just a general.
And if it needs other amendments afterwards, if it's small, we can deal with it here. If not, we can hold it. Okay. On the amendment, which the Vice Chair just explained, discussion, any objection to adopting the amendment? Senator Hester.
Sorry, I have a
Okay. Any objection on adopting the amendment? Seeing none, the amendment's adopted. The bill in front of us is the bill as amended. We'll start with Senator Simon Ayer, then Senator Hester.
So just a question for the sponsor. You mentioned the deknuckling, and you didn't want them, getting fines and so forth, only if it was willful. But in the language I was just reading, it said they can perform it for therapeutic purposes. Would that, if they had a tumor or something, would that be considered a therapeutic? So that would? That's fine. Okay, okay.
I think we allow some soft language. You know, we're not the denuckling police or the whatever. I think we want to, if you remember the testimony, the opponent said they're rarely doing it anyway. It's not being taught in vet schools. So they say, you know, it's a dying process, basically, and it's not being used much. But we wanted to leave some wiggle room if some situations come up. Senator Hester, then Senator Gallion.
Just to be clear, so on page, I guess, 8 of the amended bill, on line 21, it says a person who violates this section is subject to a fine not exceeding $1,000. So in that instance, is a person, a business, or are we fining the vet? Okay.
Yeah,
Senator Gallion,
right?
is that right?
To be clear, so person is a broad, person can mean individual or a business. So it would depend on who was, yeah, it would, that, when it's used like that, it could be either.
It makes a difference, right?
But it's not likely that a human being is going to sit there and perform surgery on their cat, though, right?
That's not my question, so. The question is, if there's 3 vets and they have a practice together, who pays the fine? The vet who made the mistake or the practice which the 3 share?
I need to check the criminal law article just because I don't draft there that often, and whether that term, because I know person is used more in that article, and I'm just want to double check and make sure I am giving you the right answer. So.
Senator Gallion, we can check what we can
Okay.
continue discussion on it. Senator Gallion.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This kind of been a tough one for me as I'm going through, so I reached out to, well, actually first, Madam Vice Chair, you've got to hear a lot about my cat over the last few days, and of course, you know, he's just passed away yesterday at almost 16 years old. He was never declawed, so you'll right here. But I've talked to several different local vets that I've had long relationships with, and the main concern they have is one issue is possible pet owners that are immunocompromised. That you know, and they're saying I take these people, I trust these vets because I've known them for 20 plus years, that they're doing this. This has gotten pretty rare. One vet said that the way he was trained to do it, he wouldn't do that anymore. And the rare circumstances he did do one, it would be like with a laser or something, not with the denuckling that you mentioned. But two of the 3 vets mentioned people that want cats that are immunocompromised and need the claws off because of the owner. I didn't know if there's anything in this bill that addresses that.
I can speak to both of those things, and I'm looking for the data because I do have data. So first off, when cats scratch, it is either to get rid of the dead, they're kind of molting, I mean, bad word, but getting rid of kind of old claw and stuff. And it's also their line of defense. So when their claws are removed, and it's also play, it's climbing, it's a lot of other things. When their claws are removed, and just to remind you, this is the equivalent of what it looks like, because it's pretty awful. So they no longer have any ability to defend themselves. So what they do instead of batting at you or scratching is they bite. And immunocompromised folks are much more likely to get diseases and have problems with bites because there's a lot more, and I've got it in here. I can find it while we look. But it turns out there are a lot more problems, and then folks who are immunocompromised end up bringing their declawed, denukkled cats to a shelter and having them put down. And there's virtually no difference for the cat's perspective between the laser technique and a surgical technique. It's the same thing, and it's still, it's bad. It's painful, and they end up not using the litter box because they're in pain,
Okay.
and they've got these like cavities in their paws.
Senator Gallion, were you given any examples? I want to be sensitive to that.
Sure.
But I'm trying to imagine what situation they could exacerbate. That's my question.
I didn't really get into that much detail with them. I mean, the main, just another thing they said, that a complete ban could have a negative impact with more cats ending up in shelters, released outdoors, banned areas of the house where they're less comfortable. So I'm just always worried about possible negative side effects to legislation. And if we're already, seeing, compared to 10 or 20 years ago, there's already, now, and this is according to the 3 that I spoke to, in my area, there's already a drastic decrease in this being done. And I mean, I wouldn't want, I didn't have it for mine, I wouldn't want that done, but, I just feel confident in the vets that I know that they're going to work with their clients and talk about alternatives. And, I'm just not sure we need to force this way when the vets are already heading in, are in that direction already. That's just my thoughts. Thank you.
Yeah, so criminal law article, it is the standard person can mean an individual or a business. I will say, that seems, it's the same person is also used in the criminal law prohibiting unauthorized surgical devocalization of cat or dogs. So presumably whoever's bringing the case would have to make a decision about whether it's the practice that's liable or culpable or the individual. Just would depend on the circumstances.
Okay, further discussion on the bill. Senator Ellis.
And Ms. I'm looking at the name. Morton. So you're saying that a person could be a individual or a business entity. I know the Supreme Court ruled that businesses are persons, and so, so that term also applies to individuals. And so that was my concern. I know everyone is thinking about the bill we just passed, but, that was my understanding is that from dealing business law was the understanding of it, and that was my issue with that bill. But we're dealing with this bill right now, but I just couldn't, help myself by bringing that up. So, so that's a problem. So anyway, I'll stop there.
Okay, we have Senator Lamb. Louder. Move the bill. Okay, the bill is in front of us as amended. Further discussion? Anybody wish to be recorded in the negative or abstention? Senator Gallion is a negative, and I will assume everyone else is a positive unless they tell me so. The bill will go to the floor 10-1. That's 67. 70.
Senate Bill 70, Emergency Medical System Plan Guidelines for Emergency Medical Services Law Enforcement Canines. This bill requires the Emergency Medical Systems Board, Emergency Medical System Plan to include guidelines that authorize EMS personnel to provide services to police canines injured in the line of duty, to transport the canine to a veterinary facility, to include guidelines to provide criminal and civil immunity for EMS employees who provide services to the dogs in good faith, and guidelines that prohibit EMS personnel from providing services to a canine if an individual concurrently needs assistance. There are no amendments.
I'm going to speak. I'm trying to figure out why we need this bill, Senator, and,
Mr. Chair, I'd worked with Ms. Foxworth on some of the issues that was raised in MIMS. And the reason we need the bill is that the stakeholders want clear authority that these emergency medical services can be provided. There is confusion. We've heard from, this is strongly endorsed by the Sheriffs and Police Chiefs Association, by the Maryland State Firefighters Association, when you talk to the medics and the EMS at the local level. So they want the clear authority. I wanted to raise the possibility for discussion of this committee about the possibility of working with Ms. Foxworth on an amendment that would codify the criminal immunity into the court's article instead of the EMS plan, which would strengthen the immunity section and also would address some of the concerns of MIMS. The bottom line and the purpose of the bill is to have in statute clear authority that these emergency medical services can be provided to law enforcement canine injured in the line of duty.
yeah.
And I ask for a
Vice
favorable
Chair.
report.
So, so I am, during the hearing, Senator Croza, I was inclined to be interested in this bill because of all my work on 911. I'm sorry to move up. I'm just looking, I'm reading the MIMS testimony, and one of the things they're worried about, they raise a few issues that I think are worth our thinking about. One of the problems is that the emergency responders may not have the specific skills of dealing with an animal. Another is the lack of resources to transport a pet, I mean, not a pet, I'm sorry, it could be a working animal, a canine, when there is such a staff shortage and first responder shortage, and then could they get it to a hospital, a veterinarian, would they have the capacity? But then the closing piece, I think both of those are valid and worth talking about. The closing paragraph says, SB 70 proposes to amend the current EMS enabling statute that describes the state EMS plan. The statute does not mention any single potential patient population, such as children. Subsequently, quote, canine would be exclusively prioritized by mentioning it 5 times in a law that codifies a system to care for the spectrum of ill and injured people.
Wait, hold it. I got a call on you, Senator.
I'm sorry?
You have to be called on.
Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Chair.
I know, just hold a minute. I never actually finished my earlier comments when, oh, were you done, or was that a question?
So, I think those are, those 3 things I think are worth our wondering about. 1 is the skill of our first responders, 2 is the availability of resources, and 3 is whether, the whole question is, are we putting canine, and I love dogs, above all other things, including children, people?
I'll come back to myself. Senator Hester, no, go ahead, please. And then I want to hear from people who haven't spoken yet. We'll come back to you, Senator Carrozza.
So I just want to say that I also had the opportunity to speak with the MIMS folks, and I actually am a first responder. On the weekends, I work ski patrol. It's a volunteer position. I have to donate 14 days a year. And so I had a really good conversation with the lady about what it meant. And so when we did our training last fall, we learned how to pack gunshot wounds. That was an example of what we did. You just take the long gauze and you stick it in the hole like until it stops bleeding. And so I asked her, I was like, well, if I know how to do that on a human, can I do it on a dog? And she said yes. But the thing is, then she showed me the plan, which looks like this. It's kind of like a visionary strategy. And then, I have a copy of the protocol that I carry with me, I mean, not here, but when I'm on patrol, which is really super technical. And so then she showed me the protocol that Maine has just about canine dogs, which is like 27 pages long and really detailed. And so the training that I took to get this every year, the training that I took to get certified was really intense. And I don't know if we had to be trained to the level of detail in this main protocol if we could all qualify. And so I would do anything to save a dog. I would put on a tourniquet, I would stuff a bloodshot wound, I would try to do oxygen. I mean, I think probably what people need in the field is like some adaptations of equipment so that we can help a dog. But I have some concerns about the bill also, as I just think it needs a little bit of further work.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I tend to agree, just from rereading the parts of the bill that are operative here. I think there's some concern, what if there is not a designated veterinary facility in close proximity, and what that will mean for EMS that's trying to respond and have to figure out how to transport a canine, which I guess this is only limited to canines. I know we had a bill that, dealt with felines a second ago, but it sounds like this is only limited to dogs. Whether or not things like, because we, in the medical field, have like a Good Samaritan law that already exists for us to be able to treat individuals who need emergency care, even if we have limited medical understanding for bystanders to do that. Is the provision in paragraph 3 needed for this instance too, given what we already have?
Thank you. And talking to my local first responders, and I'm sure if you've done some of this at the local level, you're aware that there's optional supplemental protocols that can be worked out. So I was hopeful that MIMS would come back and say, first of all, we want to authorize this and put in statute and make clear that these emergency medical services can be provided for law enforcement canine injured in the line of duty. To actually put it in statute, make it clear. I think that's important because there's confusion on the front lines, whether you talk to a canine handler or if you talk to a firefighter or a medic, and I've talked to both about this bill. And Mr. Chair, if you want me to work with MIMS, I've asked them on this optional supplemental protocol, which would then allow local jurisdictions to opt in, and it does not require the extensive training when you talk to them about, we're only talking about basic care to save the life of that canine in order to get it to a veterinarian. So we're talking those type of basic saving of life on the scene. But I absolutely, it's absolutely clear to me from talking to the first responders, whether it's law enforcement, medics, firefighters, that we need to put in statute that the authority is there, and then there could be language to work out with the local jurisdictions, an optional supplemental protocol, and perhaps that's the way that it's clear that the authority is there, and then the locals work directly with MIMS on their protocol.
Senator, I listened to the testimony, I read the testimony, and I've reread what MIMS said. For example, there are no state prohibitions that forbid or limit transporting canines. And I guess I hadn't heard that as a problem in all my years here. If a dog gets hurt and they've taken care of the primary patient, they're going to take it to a vet. I guess.
It wasn't just the transportation.
Excuse me,
Sorry.
I think I've got the floor, and
Sorry.
I deferred to you earlier when you cut me off the first time.
Sorry.
Ed, would you hit the lights? Thank you. And it seems, look, taking care of dogs and first responder dogs is very popular, and I think we want to take care of that. But I still get a flavor of it's a solution looking for a problem. And the other 10 people, prior to this bill introduction, I haven't heard saying, this is a major problem we have to address. So I just haven't been convinced that we need to put this into law and take it to the floor, to be honest with you. Senator Hester.
I was just wondering if the sponsor would be open to trying to work with MIMS over the interim and clarify this, and maybe come back with some additional, like, model guidance and maybe even a small grant program to get the equipment that we might need.
Okay. I would like to work with MIMS to make clear that the authority is in statute, that you can provide the emergency medical services. And I know you talked about the transportation, literally talking about the emergency medical services at the site. I think that's important, that that's in statute and that's clear. Then I think we could work with MIMS on a protocol or let the local jurisdictions opt in. For instance, I know that Worcester County and the town of Ocean City are already ready to work with MIMS on putting what you would call the protocol in place. So you would have a statute that would allow that those medical services to be performed on site, and then you would have an opt-in for those local jurisdictions that are ready to move forward with those protocols. I don't think we need to wait a year for that.
Before I call on the vice chair, Senator, is there any prohibition of the Ocean City or Worcester County first responders implementing a protocol on this? I mean, I guess I'm trying to understand why we need a statewide bill. If there's a concern in Worcester, Somerset, or the lower shore, and they think it's such a pressing issue, can the training they put there include how to take care of a dog?
That's a fair question, Mr. Chair. I have testimony from the Maryland State Firemen's Association when some of the MIMS issues were raised, and this is coming from, again, the endorsement from the Maryland State Firemen's Association. They would like it made clear in one place that these actions can and should take place during an emergency. And so they have given me examples of confusion on site, as well as I think I shared my local examples. Again, it seems to me that to have it in statute, that it's clear that they have those, that they can provide those services, and then to allow the locals, whether it's a local, an optional jurisdictional program. Again, the last thing I want to do is provide more mandates on any of our local emergency services. So the idea of having it approved, a local jurisdiction to opt in, working with MIMS, and the type of training that would be provided with partnerships.
Okay, Vice Chair.
If the Hester suggestion goes forward and there's conversation, I just wanted to flag for the body that the Maryland Association for Justice had a suggestion for an amendment that I think maybe Senator Crozier could look into. And the other thing that I wonder about is whether any part of this could be an unfunded mandate, and I wonder whether we need to clarify, because on lines 24 through 26 authorize EMS to transport the canine to a designated veterinary facility. At some point, someone has to pay the bill, and presumably that would be a local jurisdiction. And so I'd be curious about that.
Back to allowing the locals to opt in as a optional supplemental protocol. So I think it's really a matter of MIMS coming back and saying, this is authorized, we authorize it, this is how it could work, and allow locals to opt in.
Okay, a roll call. You've got the list?
The motion is favorable. the land
I'd like to hold it if I haven't addressed the questions of the committee, because I would like to support that. At least have the authorization to provide these services.
Yeah, I'm not sure there's agreement on that, but if you want to hold it, we'll hold it, and we'll try to come back to it at some point.
So if I come back working with MIMS and my colleagues on
There's
this.
no guarantee on anything in this committee.
Well, that,
It may come back, it may come back and be passed, it may come back and be defeated. I can't make any guarantees. It happens with all of our bills.
okay, well, I'll hold it so I can work on an amendment with MIMS.
Okay. Senate Bill 77. Didn't need the amendment.
Do you want to take the time first to describe it? Senator West called me today. He's been waiting on amendments for a very long time. He's a little frustrated, but he would rather us not spend time talking about 77 before his amendments come to us. So he asked for a hold for a week, and he'll follow up with the amendment, folks. I don't know if council wants to first describe it or what you want, Mr. Chair, but he asked that it be held.
Senate Bill 81.
Senate Bill 81, Charter Counties Enforcement of Local Building Performance Laws, Building Energy Performance Standards Act of 2022. This bill authorizes charter counties to impose civil fines up to $10 per square foot of gross floor area to enforce local building energy performance laws. A charter county must consider the assessed value of a property in determining the civil fine imposed under the bill. The bill defines gross floor area as the total indoor property square footage measured between the principal exterior surfaces of the enclosing fixed walls of a building. There is an amendment in your packet on page 10 from the bill sponsor, Senator Feldman. The amendment exempts new construction, anything built within 3 years before the penalty would be imposed, from the new civil penalty provisions.
Okay, let's start with having something in front of us. Is there a motion?
Move favorable.
It's been moved. Is there a second? Second. There's a sponsor amendment. Let's put that in front of us. It's been moved, seconded. What is the import of the amendment, Ms. Morton?
So, yeah, this is to respond to concerns, I believe, that were raised by the building industry, that basically said that there are already kind of ways of dealing with non-compliance of new construction. So they wanted this to be limited to buildings that weren't subject to those penalties that are applicable for new construction. Yes. So, and that's, I mean, generally what these building performance standards are, you know, standards that are applicable. That's what some of these counties are wanting to do, is to do energy performance standards for existing buildings.
Yeah, if I could, it's authorizing, it doesn't mandate. And I know, I believe, I can't say I know, his home county would like to take steps beyond what is currently allowed. So it puts no mandate on any, it only affects charter counties and those counties that want to adopt it. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. On the amendment, any, Senator?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And so I'm kind of perplexed in that the more likely folks to meet the standards is new construction. So I still can't get my brain around why we would exempt new construction from this. And at what point would they come under the provision of this bill if a county goes to choose to enact this authorization?
Sure. So, and these are based off of, there's testimony from the Maryland Building Industry Association, and I believe also from AIA, the architects might also reference this. Basically, this would give like a 3-year window. So when a building is built, they'd have 3 years where they're not subject to this penalty. But then after that 3 years, they would be if they're still out of compliance.
Okay.
And the idea, again, is that there's all sorts of other sort of enforcement mechanisms and penalties that are applicable within that first kind of 3-year window that the building industry believes is more appropriate for those newly built buildings. But once that building has been there for 3 years and 1 day, they would be subject to any penalties under a law enacted under this bill.
So a new building will not be forever exempt.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Address the, I mean, if those who were unfavorable are now okay with it with this amendment, did they state that one way or the other?
The unfavorables, this was in response to the Maryland Building Industry Association, which was favorable with amendments.
Gotcha.
I doubt that because I believe the unfavorable was from NIAP, so they are more concerned with existing buildings than the builders are.
On the amendment, any objection to the amendment? Seeing none, the amendment's adopted. The bill as amended is before us. Discussion. Senator.
Chairman. So I'm always trying to figure out the difference and why we need to just say charter counties for this bill and not like code home rule counties, like, because my county, Charles County, is not a charter county. So if you could go through the reason why this bill would need to just authorize charter counties and not all counties in Maryland.
Yeah, my understanding, and I'm not an expert on local law and the differences between the different governance structures, but my understanding is what this is really about is right now in law, charter counties are, and it's on page 2 of the bill, are currently limited in the maximum fines they can set for local laws. And so that currently civil fines may not exceed $1,000 and criminal fines and penalties may not exceed $1,000. This is for any local law that they enact. The other, that cap is only applicable to charter counties. There might be reasons why the code and the other counties don't have that cap. I'm not quite clear what it is, but basically what this is really about is for these building energy performance standards where I think the concern is $1,000 wouldn't be enough and they'd want to base it off of like a sliding scale based off of square footage to allow them to go beyond that current statutory cap.
Senator, if I could add, and I haven't spoken to the sponsor, even though it's authorizing, I think he wanted to keep it narrow, even though, do you restrict authority to others? He hadn't heard any crying demand from code counties or commission counties. He had heard from at least one charter county, maybe a couple more. So he wanted to keep it narrow cast, I think. I mean, obviously, if commission counties, charter, or code counties want to come in and amend or do one next year, I'm sure he would support it. He just didn't want to get too involved statewide, is my understanding. Senator.
Thank you very much. Could council review with us the fine per square foot and under what conditions the fine would be imposed?
So this would allow them to enact civil fines not exceeding $10 per square foot.
Under what conditions would they impose?
So this would be for a violation of a locally enacted building energy performance law.
So if I understand correctly, first the county has to establish the law,
Correct.
and generally when a law is established, it's prospective.
Correct. Well, yes, but it's prospective in the sense that right, they can't go back and,
Yeah, I have a 20-year-old building, and it has minimal insulation. While my next-door neighbor built a brand-new building within the past 3 years, and the county code at this point requires them to have a R40 insulation. So the county can go back to my building and fine me because it was built according to code 20 years ago?
so a building energy performance, the standards that they're envisioning here, potentially, yes, you could set a standard that says all buildings have to meet this level of efficiency. It wouldn't be to the level of what kind of insulation they have, but it would be whatever it would be, and they could potentially wrap in previously built buildings.
Thank you very much. Mr. Chairman, I'll be voting against this bill.
Debate. Let's do a roll call. We'll start with the Vice Chair.
Yeah, you have any buildings?
Vice Chair Kagan? Senator Lamb? Senator Hester? Senator Ellis? Senator Gallion? Senator Carozza? Senator Washington? Senator Riley?
No.
Senator Patterson? Senator Simon Air? Senator Pinsky? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 to 4. Favorable, it passes favorable with amendments.
Okay, thank you. Senator Eckert has asked me to hold 82. I'm sorry? Oh, okay, I'm working off an old list. 82 is still being held. Okay, let's go to 90 then.
Senate Bill 90, Department of the Environment Supplemental Environmental Projects Database. This bill defines a supplemental environmental project, or SEP, and requires the Maryland Department of the Environment to create and maintain a database of SEPs that the department may consider for implementation as part of a settlement of an enforcement action. In creating and maintaining the database, the department must solicit input from communities in the state that are overburdened, underserved, or otherwise disadvantaged by environmental stressors. The bill establishes limitations and considerations that the department must take into account when choosing a SEP as part of a settlement of an enforcement action and before a violator undertakes a SEP. The similar bill passed this committee last year.
Move favorable.
Moved and seconded, the bill to before us in the favorable posture, debate, discussion. Seeing none, does anybody wish to be recorded in the negative? Seeing none, it goes to the floor 11-0. Senate Bill 96.
Senate Bill 96, Community Parks and Playgrounds Program, Charles County Basketball Courts. This bill expands the authorized uses of the Community Parks and Playgrounds Program within the Department of Natural Resources, which currently provides grants only to municipal corporations in Baltimore City. The bill would require the program to make grants available to Charles County for the construction and maintenance of basketball courts at county parks with baseball fields. The bill requires the governing body of Charles County to apply for grants under the program and to use the grant funding received for the specified purposes.
It's been moved by Senator Patterson, favorable, and seconded Senator Riley. Discussion on the bill. Senator Gallion, then we'll go to Riley.
Yeah, so question on this. So with this fund, I was reading the email we got from MML. So right now, this is municipalities that use this money, and this bill would add, so Charles County could also use that, is that correct? So my concern with that is then, what about like Harford County, other counties down the road wanting to, it would just dilute that pot that was intended for these municipalities, right?
Oh, I'm sorry.
It wouldn't increase the fund, though.
Sorry.
It wouldn't increase the fund, though, right? It's still the same amount of money.
Thank you very much. Mr. Chair, I sat for a day and listened to Senator Ellis talk about the lack of facilities in Charles County over and over and over again, whether it's the community colleges or the parks or whatever. So for those of you who don't know, I have 8 brothers and sisters. That's 9 of us. 3 of them had Division I basketball scholarships. We didn't belong to a gymnasium where we could play indoor basketball. We got out the shovel during the winter and shoveled off the backyard asphalt. Community park, basketball parks aren't extremely expensive. You clear some ground, you flatten it out, you put on some asphalt, you put up a basketball court, and you use metal nets, because you can't use nylon nets, they wear out. This is an issue where I believe the Speaker of the House addressed it last year in a very local bill up in her community, and I think it's a very reasonable event. You're not creating new parks. You're saying if there's a baseball field, find a place to put up a couple of nets, a couple of backboards. I'm very much in favor of low-cost, highly used, and if it's going to be by a baseball field, the kids will be there. And I'm very much in favor of it. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Get a dam.
The first step. Vice Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I know none of you guys have ever heard this before, but I'm very proud to be the senator for where? Rockville and Gaithersburg, and I'm here with the chief here. So I'm just reading a couple lines of this bill, which is, it is state public policy to both restore existing park and green space systems and create new park and green space systems in the municipal corporations of the state, which is our 157 cities and towns, Baltimore City, which is considered a city, and this bill would say, and Charles County, which is not on the list of 157 cities and towns. So my worry, colleagues, is that this is the beginning of a slippery slope and that 23 more counties are going to say, crap, I want a bite of that apple too. Do I think that Senator Ellis has told compelling stories about the lack of basketball fields? Absolutely. Do I think that Charles County should be putting money into Waldorf and creating basketball courts? Absolutely. Do I think kids would, if they build it, they will come? Absolutely. I think kids would love that. Do I think that this is the right place for it and the right bill for it? I do not. I will be voting against the bill, with all due respect and love for my colleague in District 28. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Senator Washington?
Same, and again, I respect everything that you're doing here, but I will tell you that counties have received money from the Community Parks and Playground Program. So I would say, Senator Ellis, you don't need this bill. And as recently as 2020, Cecil County received $67,000 for a tot lot improvements under community parks, playgrounds, and I've looked through, and a number of counties have received. So maybe there needs, I think it's been done. So you don't need this bill to qualify. I think you can just use our capital process here to get what you want in this bill.
Senator Riley, you've spoken. Senator Ellis is not. I'll Senator Ellis, then myself, then Senator Riley.
Yeah, so thank you, Mr. Chairman. And so, it's a kind of a complicated issue, and this bill was meant to fix the inequity where we have parks in the county, most of the parks in the county, which are not in Waldorf, the 4th largest jurisdiction in city in Maryland, but it's not incorporated. No basketball courts, and so the bill drafters, when I put the bill and said, hey, there's this fund that can be used also for basketball courts. It's low cost, we won't be acquiring parks and land and stuff like that. It's basically pavement and the hoops to fix inequity. And so, you know, it seems like it's impossible for folks to share anything in the state. We have people just left out, and it's just very disappointing that, you know, when it comes to putting money to fix inequities, everyone say, "Oh, you're not going to get anything we got," and so it's very disappointing to hear that when so many people don't have. So if we hold this bill and if we take out the fund to NPR, National Public Radio, to NPR, the master, take out the requirement, we'll basically maybe look to put it back in the maybe open space and do that. So I think probably can we hold this for a bit, and we'll take out some of those language and kind of help people who just been kicked and just, you know, it's just very disappointing. You know, usually I'm proud to be here, but, you know, when you're fighting for folks who got nothing, and, you know, I'll just kind of work on my disappointment and try to see how we can work out the language to get these kids who need something, you know.
Senator Patterson, then Senator Washington.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and colleagues. I guess I look at this from a slightly different perspective. As one who traveled the state in and out of all the correctional centers, looking at those who are there because they probably didn't have a facility, a playground to go to where they probably would have been saved. And I just think it's so critical that we don't lose track on a little amount that we spend that probably could give us big returns down the road. We talk about this little bit of money. Well, heck, we spend $40,000 annually to keep one of those same kids incarcerated. So I'm very sympathetic to that type of movement, and I don't know where he's going with his bill, but I can tell you, if it get before me, I certainly will be supporting it.
Again, I just want to clarify that we don't need a legislation to do this. And so it's clear, and I think we're just learning about how to read the code, et cetera. But what you can designate any place within Charles County, because I'm seeing a number of places, you know, before you, this is years, you know, a few years before you're in office, that you can designate using that community park fund and say, I want to play, you know, I want a playground. Like you, in this session, when we're going through our budget process and our capital process, you can do that. We don't need a bill to do that. That's what I meant. And so I would, would support it.
Yeah, and I'm going to make a comment, then we're going to hold the bill as requested by the senator. There's money designated for the counties for recreation open space, and then there's a smaller pot of money for municipalities in Baltimore City. Senator, while I'm sympathetic to getting more recreation for kids, I have 7 municipalities inside the Beltway where, you know, in New Carrollton, they're mostly working and poor kids, Black, African American, West African, I mean, all kinds of folks. And I wish I had more activities, you know. So we all want to try to address the school to community pipeline to prison and have all of those activities. I just had a conversation day before yesterday of getting a midnight basketball league restarting Prince George's County that got stopped. So, but for example, adding Charles County means it's going to take money from Baltimore City and other municipalities of other kids as well. So I think, I won't speak for everyone, I'm sympathetic. We should do more for people in need, young people in need particularly. And in some cases, it's bond bills that we have at our disposal. It's sometimes putting a bill in the budget and tax saying, I want X in the budget and asking for it. But I think we've got to be careful when we're setting statewide policy. And someone, and I don't know if it was our committee or some other committee, decided that municipalities in Baltimore City should get a designated fund, just like the counties get a designated fund. So I think we just have to be careful. I'm not saying they can't ever be touched or changed, because that's why we're here every year. But there was some reasoning and logic to setting up some of these programs, and I just think we need to be careful. So I said, everyone's had a chance to speak, and I said, and there's been a move to hold the bill, so I think we're going to hold it, Senator. I think we heard from you once, unless you absolutely want to say one more thing.
Mr. Chair, I wish we could be that impassioned about how other things impact various communities. I could give you 10 examples where monies are being taken from my district for others' location, and I don't knock that because situations changes from time to time. But when you don't have anything, it makes it much, much more difficult for me personally. And I can tell you, sitting right here, when you talk about situation, I could look at the local impact fund for the lottery system. It specifically says in the bill that it should be fund managers in close proximity to the casino. That's not the case. They got them all over, even where you don't have casino. Now, all that money is supposed to be coming down to those, including my district, that would benefit me in doing programs that I like to expend. But I understand there come a time when it's okay to share. Thank you.
The bill is being held, that was 96. I need my glasses. 96 will be held. We're moving on to 108.
Senate Bill 108, Charles County Public Library Imagination Library Program funding. This bill authorizes the Charles County Public Library to partner with an Imagination Library program to provide free books to children up to 5 years of age. From fiscal 2024 through 2033, the governor must annually include an appropriation to the Charles County Public Library of $2.10 for each child for each month that the child is registered in the program. The bill takes effect July 1, 2022, and terminates on June 30th, 2032. There are no amendments, and there was no opposition at the hearing.
There is hope. Seconded discussion on the bill. Will anybody wish to be recorded in the opposition? Seeing none, the bill will go to the floor with unanimous approval from the committee. That's 108. 119.
Senator Ellis, that was a good use of like Jewish guilt, I'm just saying. Jewish guilt, Catholic guilt, whatever other guilt, all on top. And boom.
Charles County guilt.
Charles County guilt and it flies.
So I'm not sure that's ever happened to me before with that big, crowd of favorable. Okay. Senate Bill 119, Education Crimes on School Grounds Application. This bill establishes that specified prohibitions against disruptive, violent, or threatening behavior on the grounds of institutions of elementary, secondary, or higher education or at school-sponsored events do not apply to 1, students attending a school where the offense occurred, 2, students on exclusionary discipline from the school, 3, a student attending another institution who is participating in a sporting event or other extracurricular event sponsored by the school where the offense occurs. As a result, these students are not subject to the criminal penalties in this provision of law that apply to these prohibited offenses. There are no amendments.
It's been moved and seconded. Discussion on the bill. Yes.
Either to Senator Washington or to Ms. Goodman. I'm just in the testimony from the Maryland State Education Association, which was the only group that came in favorable with amendments. And I just wonder whether there was any consideration as to the merits of their opinion. And, I mean, I know that none of us asked for that amendment, which is why it's not before us. But before we move forward, I just...
It the same way it came through last year. Oh, sorry, it just came through the House as in this version, which is the same version that it passed out last year.
With no amendment.
No amendment, so, yeah, they just voted on it today.
Senator Carrozza, and then back to Simon Ayer if he'd like to add.
I just wanted to clarify, so the version that we're considering now is the same version that passed the House last year, 91 to 42?
I apologize. I remember getting in on the last part of this hearing, so I didn't hear the whole thing. So I'm just reading it real quickly. So basically, does this exempt the list you read, the students in there, so that they may willfully disturb or otherwise willfully prevent the orderly conduct and activities, etc.?
What this bill does is the provisions in this particular part of the law is kind of a broad prohibition on acting up, for lack of a better term, meaning they can't come onto a school grounds, a college grounds, high school grounds, and then, you know, disrupt a football game that's happening there or something like that. Or say a student is at school and they throw a temper tantrum or there's a huge fight or something like that. So what they could call the police on that student and they could charge them with violating this particular provision of law, which says they can't willfully disturb or prevent the orderly conduct activities at these types of institutions. The testimony at the hearing was that this was disproportionately used against people of color, especially students of color, and that that there's other provisions in the criminal law article that can still be used if a major event were to occur. For example, if somebody were to attack another student by hitting them or punching them or causing a brawl at a high school game, athletic event, they could still be charged under those particular provisions of law. It's just in this particular case, they can't use this more vague standard to prohibit behavior that sometimes can come off as mouthing off at the principal or, you know, throwing some papers in the air and stomping out of the room in class or having a bad day. And then suddenly, you know, they can't control this kid, so they charge them with this and it becomes a criminal event. So that is what the purpose of this particular bill is.
And then let me just, if I can complete. I'm looking at the new C, and it says a person may not molest or threaten with bodily harm any student, employee, administrator, etc. So this would not apply to students. We would be repealing that application to a student, so they could molest or threaten to bodily harm.
Well, if they did, they would still be subject to other criminal penalties and other provisions of law. They just would not be able to be charged under this particular provision.
I'm going to jump in here. I didn't understand it at first, but maybe not verbatim, but all of this is placed in the criminal, exists in the criminal code. For whatever reason, it was replicated in the education article. and in some cases abused, but it does not mean anybody doing any of those things can be criminally charged, and hopefully will be criminally charged if they do those kind of dastardly things. Is that?
Exactly. I mean,
On to that. This is just, if I understand it correctly, removing one subsection of people, but still allowed to charge other people for doing this. And if the case is, if it's in criminal law, why do we even have this statute? But what you're not getting rid of the statute, you're just saying one subset of the population won't be applied to this. She's saying yes.
Again, so in the last year and previous years, it was simply to remove it because it is vague and not specific. However, through negotiating with the school district, the school systems, and just think this is a negotiated position, that if you're not a student, so if, for example, if you don't attend the school, you know, or you're a parent or something, if you're some other person, they have this tool. So it's just not applying with students. And they testified that, yeah, they see that it's in the code. And also it has, which I laid out, a history that is related to the civil unrest in the 1960s and was targeted mostly for college students. And then it just expanded to the elementary schools. I also want to say that unfortunately, staff said something about violent. It is not at all violent. This is about the language talks about disruptions. And yeah, so that you may not disturb or disrupt. It does not talk about being violent at all. You can be charged under a number of codes. If you steal something, anything that one would do could be charged in other parts of the code. But unfortunately, what people have been charged with, this, by the way, it has a $2,500 fine and up to a year of imprisonment is the issue, that it's criminal. And so for talking back, refusing to sit down, throwing your hands up, getting into an argument, coming to class late, people who have violated the dress code. The other group that is that nearly 25% are students who are disabled. So we had, in fact, a mother testified about how her disabled daughter, had been prosecuted under this. So again, it is, it's taking criminal code out of the education code. Anything that violates law can still be charged. They still have the ability to charge someone who actually breaks the law. It's just not in our education code.
that just,
Yes.
so again, it remains in the education code, but as Senator Simonaire did say, this just now does not apply to students who attend these institutions.
So, can you just tell me what the comparison for the same, if they molest or threaten to, what's the word, bodily harm, what is the criminal penalty versus what we have in here? And I understand disturbing classroom, but molesting somebody or threatening them with bodily harm is not just disturbing the class.
Let's see. So are you looking, we have, there's assault, reckless endangerment, related crimes or sexual crimes, and sexual offenses, attempted rape. I'm not an expert in the criminal law article by any stretch. But a sexual offense in the third degree, Sure. Please.
So I thought, well, why don't I look to see what other crimes have similar penalties that are in this code, right? So what's similar? And so theft of property is, actually, it's a lighter sentence. Theft of property of at least $100 is just $1,500 in 6 months. Willfully and maliciously killing a service animal is a $2,500 fine in no time. Failing to comply with or a violation of a protective order is only $1,000 and no time. And operating a vehicle while under the influence of alcohol, your first offense is $1,000 and no time. A CDS paraphernalia possession and unlawful possession, administering, or obtaining substance by fraud is only $1,000. And carrying a handgun without a permit, the penalty for the first offense is 30 days, no more than 3 years, and only a fine between $2,500 and $2,500. This crime for disrupting a school has a year penalty and a $2,500 crime. So, one, it doesn't belong in the code to have it apply for students, and there are other places where these crimes can be charged if you're interested in charging them.
Bill, no amendments. The bill, further discussion? Hand vote or a roll call? Okay. Okay. Out of order. Okay.
Senator Kagan.
Aye.
Senator Lamb. Senator Hester. Senator Ellis. Senator Gallion.
I'd like to explain my vote, sympathetic to it, but I worked, before going through the Kerwin bill, a lot of discussion was brought up about discipline in the schools, and in my district, I heard from a lot of teachers dealing with these issues. So, I'm sympathetic. I'm not quite comfortable voting for it, so I'll be no.
Senator Carrozza. No. Senator Washington. Yes. Senator Riley. No. Senator Patterson. Yes. Senator Simonaire. No. Chair Pidsky.
Yes.
7-4.
Okay. We are on to Senate Bill 120, Senator Lamb.
Senate Bill 120, acupuncture license requirement, requires acupuncture license applicants to have a master's level degree or a diplomate in acupuncture and a passing score on an examination after May 31st, 2026. Prior to that date, current statutory qualifications for licensure are remain in play. There is one, or actually two amendments. One is a technical amendment sponsored by Senator Pinsky to correct a typo. And the other amendment is sponsored by Senator Lamb, which modifies this licensure scheme. So whereas the proposal was to have a master's degree or a diplomate and a passing score, it would require applicants after that same date in 2026 to have a master's degree and a passing score on that exam. And it repeals the diplomate requirement in total.
It's been moved, seconded. The technical correction, the crucial Pinsky amendment that fix the typo, no objection to that. The second amendment, again, Ms. Foxworth, just repeat what the second amendment was.
So the Second Amendment requires education and a passing score on a national certifying exam.
Got it. Any objection to the amendment? Then the amendment is hereby adopted. The bill, as amended with the two amendments, discussion. Seeing none, anybody wish to be recorded in the negative? Seeing not, it'll pass to the floor 11-0.
unfavorable.
Okay, let me call the bill first, then I'll call on you.
Just getting out ahead of it, Mr. Chairman.
Wait,
Senate Bill 229.
oh,
Move unfavorable.
birthday present.
Birthday present, move unfavorable.
Senate Bill 229,
He's blushing.
I'm hoping that's in jest, it is not April 1st.
Yeah, it's totally in jest.
Senate
Okay.
Bill 229, Environment On-Farm Composting Facilities Permit Exemption. This bill requires the Maryland Department of the Environment to establish an exemption by regulation for the permitting requirements under the Code of Maryland Regulations 26.04.11.06 for an on-farm composting facility that, 1, uses 40,000 square feet of area or less in support of food scrap composting, and 2, meets any other conditions specified in regulations. There is an amendment in your voting packet on page 16, being offered by Senator Gallion, the bill's sponsor. There's also a reprint that starts on page 20. The amendment establishes additional requirements and restrictions for on-farm composting without a permit. Specifically, the bill restricts the materials that may be composted, and if you look on page 22, you can see in the reprint more specifically what those restrictions are. It also requires the facility to operate in accordance with a nutrient management plan and soil conservation and water quality plan, and also to keep certain records. That's that amendment, and then I would also note that Senator Hester has requested to be added as a co-sponsor to this bill, so that would be another amendment.
Slow down.
Move favorable.
Second motion.
Moved and seconded. Let's do the amendment first.
I have questions on the amendment.
Okay. I want to do the substantive amendment in case it affects how people want to be added to the bill or not. So, Senator.
Before we invest a ton of time on this one, we've worked really hard with the House cross-file and also with other groups trying to get these amendments just right, and we're still just a little bit off. We had MDE reached out with one small change they needed to the amendment. So I think this thing was about to pass on my birthday here, but I'm going to unfortunately have to ask for a hold because I want to make sure I have the product as good as possible before we bring it up for a final vote, Mr. Chairman. We're close. We're very close. We're almost to the finish line on it, but we're just not quite there yet.
I have a question before.
Do you mind a question on this? We'll take a couple questions on the substance that might lead
Sure.
to other amendments, Vice Chair.
A really quick question, Senator Gallion, as you're getting close to the finish line, and maybe our excellent legal counsel can answer this question. On page 16, literally, is DLS still using man-made inert materials? And maybe, I mean, we may not need an answer right now, but I am curious, and I thought we were trying to get rid of gender words, and so maybe if someone at DLS can look into that. So I don't need the answer now, but I'd love not to see that in the final version. Artificial, there are a million different words.
So I did not draft these amendments off the top of my head, but I suspect they might be referencing regulations or something, so we might have to be a little bit careful. We will keep it in mind, but we wouldn't, if it's based off of something else, sometimes we have to just keep the language the same. But noted.
We are going to Senate Bill 230.
Senate Bill 230, Health Occupation Service Members, Veterans, and Military Spouses, Temporary Licensure, Certification, Registration, and Permitting. This bill requires each health occupations board to issue an expedited temporary license for service members, veterans, and military spouses who hold a valid license in good standing in another state for either over 1 year or under 1 year, and who meet additional requirements. The additional requirements include proof of residency or assignment to a duty station, submission of an application for full licensure. The bill authorizes the Secretary of Health to also authorize an additional process outside of those codified requirements. There are two amendments. The first is sponsored by, there's one amendment currently in your packet. Actually, no, sorry, excuse me. There's a co-sponsor amendment that we have finalized, and I've been talking to another sponsor about amendments, but that is not for me to disclose. So we have one co-sponsor amendment from Senator Hester.
Senator Lamb,
Okay.
have the bill behind it before us?
Senator Lamb.
So, I know the council couldn't disclose, but I was the one that's waiting on the other amendment. I think I had amendments that were requested from the amendment office dealing with, there were some concerns that were brought up in the hearing with regards to transferring criminal background checks across state lines and such, and confidentiality. So I had requested that as part of the amendment, as well as right, the uniform services piece for the public health service, for example. And there was also a provision at the end that allows them to kind of circumvent current requirements, things like background checks and other things that are in statute as part of the temporary license. And I just want to clarify that that still would be applicable to these people that are seeking temporary licenses. But it's still waiting on this in the amendment office, so.
Another hold.
The next one is not a hold. The next one is not a hold.
SB 238, Public Schools, Crossing Guards, Hiring and Budget Allocation. This bill requires each local board of education to require the local school system to hire crossing guards for each public school in the county. Local boards must provide sufficient funds in the board budget to meet this requirement. If a local board is not able to provide sufficient funding to meet these requirements, the county police department must hire additional school crossing guards to meet the required number of crossing guards and provide sufficient funding in the county police department budget. There are no amendments.
Move unfavorable.
Is there a second? It's been moved and seconded. Discussion. Yes.
Do you know who the most famous crossing guard in Maryland is?
Yes.
In your district.
Yeah. I've seen it on Twitter like
Who is
a
it?
gazillion times.
Who is it? I'm sorry, Adrian Dantley. DeMatha grad, Notre Dame grad, NBA. He got bored sitting home. He was a crossing guard. Well, that was a different one. This guy was an NBA player. Adrian Dantley, most famous crossing guard in Maryland.
Do you want to speak to the bill or not?
Sure, I mean. So I'm not going to go deep into this because I just think it's another, it's an unfunded mandate. It creates a requirement that might not fit. It's a one-size-fits-all, and not every school district has kids who can walk to school safely. I just think it starts a whole program that's going to cost money and may not be appropriate. I think our 24 jurisdictions can make those decisions.
I would just echo one point, and I think it was well-intended. I understand that. But there are numbers of schools that don't have anybody walking, and this requires all of them to have walking guards. I think, it wasn't fully thought out, so, anyway. Well-intentioned. Roll call. Or not? Okay.
Just to make that clear. Sorry.
Senator Lamb.
You start with Vice Chair.
Yeah,
I
I said yes.
yes,
Unfavorable,
sorry.
kill the bill. Yeah.
Senator Hester. Senator Ellis.
No.
Senator Gallion. Senator Carrozza. Senator Washington. Senator Riley. Senator Patterson. Senator Simonaire. Chair Pinsky.
Unfavorable, 7-4. Gets reported as such. 268.
You want me to go first? You want to go first? You want me to go first?
Briefly.
Yes.
So briefly, Senate Bill 268, pesticide regulation, transfer to the Department of the Environment. This bill would transfer the responsibility for administering pesticide regulation from the Department of Agriculture to the Department of the Environment.
With consultation from Health and Ag. Thank you, colleagues, for a really interesting conversation and hearing the other day. I think it's a conversation that we need to continue. This is not the bill, as I indicated last week, and so I'm going to move unfavorable on my own bill, but I look forward to continuing the conversation. I'd love to have your ideas on it.
Does anyone want to be recorded against the unfavorable?
Fighting like a tiger.
Okay, that receives an unfavorable unanimously. 296.
Senate Bill 296, Land Use, Agritourism Definition. This bill establishes that camping and incidental outdoor stays are included under the definition of agritourism under Section 4-212 of the Land Use article. Just to be clear, that the definition there is for counties to adopt at their discretion. They can also amend it at their discretion. So this would just add it in the model definition.
Move favorable.
Discussion.
Happy birthday. It's one you can take out.
What the committee giveth, the committee may taketh away. Senator Carosa.
Offering a friendly amendment to be added as a co-sponsor, please.
It's adopted. Any discussion? I assume we can all be recorded in the affirmative as the bill is amended, sending it to the floor. And the final bill of the day.
Senate Bill 325, Student Data Privacy Protections, Digital Tools, and Student Data Privacy Council. This bill requires each local board of education by July 1, 2022, and annually thereafter to submit a list that contains approved digital tools known to be used by educators, and digital tools not authorized by the local board of education. MSDE must publish an online database of the digital tools by September 1, 2022, and annually thereafter. Further, the bill changes the definitions of covered information, operator, and persistent unique identifier with regard to the Student Data Privacy Act of 2015. This reconstitutes the Student Data Privacy Council, which terminated last year. And by December 1, the council must report on certain information to the General Assembly. There is one amendment. It's in your packet on page 24. And this amendment would strike the provisions related to the digital tool database and one of the reporting requirements of the council. And essentially, it would just reconstitute the council, keep the definitions, and those are consistent with the recommendations of the council before it was the last report of the council.
Before I make a motion?
Yeah, I'm sorry.
It's Senator Pinsky's amendment. We talked about it.
Yeah.
Okay, we did.
Before I make a motion, I would love to hear what Senator Hester thinks of the bill, if that's an appropriate question, Senator Pinsky?
Well,
Mr.
if she wants
Chairman?
to comment on it, she can. I'm not sure.
Okay, never mind,
People
never mind.
need- I mean,
Withdraw.
She can always speak to it if she wants. But don't be forced to, because Vice Chair puts you on the spot.
The bill sponsor for her hard work on student data privacy. I think reconstituting the board is a really good idea. I did have some concern about part of the provision that has now been struck out, so that concern is eliminated.
Amendment, anybody have an objection to the amendment to slim it down and take care of some questionable area? Seeing none, the amendment is adopted. So the bill's amended is before us. Would anybody like to be recorded in opposition to the favorable? Seeing none, the bill will go to, I'm sorry, your light is still on, you want, okay. Seeing not, the bill reported to the floor 11-0 for our next report. Okay, that's our list. We did.
Could I hop on as a co-sponsor?
Sure.
Thank you so much.
Any objection? No. Anybody else? Okay, we did hold 6 bills today. Let me, well, thank you for all the work and the thoughtfulness. Next week, obviously tomorrow you do not have to come in unless you want to come in.
Oh, we have one more list real quick.
Oh,
These are withdrawals.
are they all withdrawals?
Favorable.
Could you tell folks
Which bill?
what they are?
Yeah, sure.
So this is voting list number 5. We don't want to forget here. This is Senate Bill 102, Hartford County Alcoholic Beverages Sale of Beer and Retail Dealer, withdrawn. Senate Bill 284, Election Law Voter Registration Drive, High Schools, withdrawn. Senate Bill 312, Health Occupations, Nurse Anesthetist, Drug Authority and Collaboration, withdrawn. And Senate Bill 821, Medical Excellence Zone Compact, withdrawn.
Thank you.
That's a consent agenda. Anybody object to withdrawing those bills? So they get an unfavorable. Okay, let's talk about next week for a minute. First of all, like I said, you don't have to come in tomorrow.
Chairman, screen or not screen?
No, it can be streamed. Nothing is secret. Monday, do we have session Monday?
Yes.
Okay, executive noms in person. It is President's Day? Lincoln Day speech. Who's doing it? Senator West is doing that on Monday. Tuesday is a new era. We will be here. I think I shared with you, we're going to have half capacity. Hopefully by then, we'll have a sign on every seat or every other seat, not to sit there, so we'll have up to half capacity. Anybody who comes in this room, well, they have to come in the building with a mask. They have to retain the mask while they're in the room. If someone takes it down, I will ask them to put it back up. And then if they don't, we're going to use security to have them removed. That's the deal. We will probably move to 2 or 3 chairs instead of 4 to keep space at the table. Obviously, we will retain masks, and if you're having tea or coffee, just put it back on after your sip. So that's the rough plan for next week, Tuesday. Now, unfortunately, and I take responsibility, it was done totally independently on a timeline, but Tuesday we have a bill that's going to take a significant amount of time. It's a climate bill. Last year's version plus, it's changed maybe 40%. Obviously, you know, a large percentage of the bill, we spent a lot of time on it last year. So there'll be witnesses for and against that bill. I hope we didn't schedule a lot of bills that day, but it is what it is. We'll use the clock as we have. We have bills scheduled Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. Thursday, last year on the climate bill, we took a couple hours to walk through the bill with Ms. Morton, who knows it probably better than I and Ian, to go through it so people can prepare amendments. Obviously, it's an open amendment process. I'm not going to walk through the whole bill and take 30 minutes to explain it on Tuesday, just to give you whatever. I'll try to be relatively brief. But I know people will have an interest in it, will want amendments. So Thursday, we are going to have a walkthrough after bill hearings. I don't know if that'll take an hour or 2 hours, whatever. We want to do it thoroughly. Again, some sections you're familiar with. but I want you to know what's in it so you can prepare amendments, because the following week we will vote on it, probably Tuesday. So it'll do a walkthrough on Thursday. There will be a call for a vote, and there will be a hold. We're not voting on Thursday. And early in the week, tentatively Tuesday, we'll have a work session on the bill. I'll mark up and vote it, because then it's got to go to budget and tax. So that's the following week. So next week, because of the walkthrough on Thursday, we will have a new list of bills that we heard this week, which will probably be 20 or 30, and then we have bills we've put on hold. So we will have a voting session next Friday. There will also be a session next Friday. My guess is it'll be 11 o'clock. So after that session, maybe we'll take a half hour so you can eat in your own offices, and then we'll vote. Whether it takes an hour and a half, 2.5, 3.5, we'll just have to make some decision. I don't want to keep you on a Friday evening, obviously, but we got to make progress since they keep loading bills to us, and they're getting more complicated. I mean, they are absolutely getting more complicated, and we've got to decide which ones we're going to not pass and which ones, with our collective wisdom, we can improve. Now, I may send a few to subcommittee, to the environmental subcommittee. I believe tentatively we're going to do the enforcement bill from the AG to Senator Lamb's environmental subcommittee. And there may be a few bills to the health subcommittee chaired by the vice chair. We have not changed the makeup from last year, so that is your subcommittee. I'll try to make that decision in the next day or two, so we can start scheduling those, and you're gonna have to figure out a time to do it, whether it's at 8:30 in the morning when there's not a caucus, or after session, or at 5 o'clock or 6 o'clock. If the subcommittee can make the bill better, or kill the bill, whatever they're gonna do with it, we shouldn't have to work out every bill fully. Let me stop. Senator Gallion.
On the climate bill, so, we remember how things kind of ended with that last year. I've heard that the House has like 4 or 5 different bills. They don't have an exact cross-file of your bill. How do you envision that playing out? I mean, are we gonna end up breaking things up like them and doing crosses, or are they gonna try to take, or is ours gonna go across if it passes? I'm just curious how that's going to play out, because, I know according to meeting reports, you've had meetings during the interim and all. So I was just curious if you could, and you may not be able to answer that today, but I would like to know if you can give us any details,
I'm going to say it as carefully as I can. I think we've been in conversation with the House, my counterpart, and also the Speaker's office, mostly talking about substance, not to talk about processes or vehicles. They are starting with, it might even be more than 4 or 5 bills, it could be 6, I'm not sure. Much of it overlaps the bill you're going to hear on this side. And in fact, in some of the bills, we've both used the same language to try to avoid having to nitpick later on. There are a couple of things in this bill that they have not included, that we didn't come to common agreement on in terms of introduction. There are probably some things they had that we haven't. What I can tell you is they are starting with multiple bills. They want different committees to have different bills and different people to be sponsors of the different bills. So we are going to respect their process, and those bills, in whatever form, will come over here. My hope, and the Senate President agrees, that we're going to send over an omnibus bill, and then we will do whatever we do with those 4 or 5 or 6 bills, and our expectation, our hope, is that they will respect our process. So that's what I can say at this point. I think everyone is on the same page in both chambers. obviously, that's not agreement on all the substance, that's gonna be worked out. And look, you're gonna have amendments, there's a boatload from, I'm sure we'll hear from the hearing. So just like we made some changes, Senator Riley, on the transportation, on the electric vehicles. So, and we actually included most of the amendments that we adopted last year. So, again, 60% of it, 65% of it, you've heard doesn't change. There are 3 or 4 more sections that are new, different, maybe a little more aggressive, and we'll take it up. And then we'll vote, do amendments, and deal with it. So that's as much as I can sort of say publicly. I don't want to create a rift when there's no rift between the two chambers. Senator.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So last year, we did a fine job, I believe, with the climate change bill. It went to somewhere in the budgeting process, and I got a lot of negative letters and calls because they were saying that the way that the bill was paid for, one of the things that they rated the heating fund. And so is there any way we can make sure we're protected this year so that when we pass something and it goes out of our hands, that doesn't happen again?
Thank you, Senator. And obviously, I'll go into detail on Tuesday. We don't use either of those two funds. Look, it's not going to be a secret. It's going to come from the general fund, and I've been in conversation with the Chair of Budget and Tax and with the Senate President. And I think that path will be cleared much more cleanly this year than last year. I don't think that is an issue being debated a lot. I mean, which of the programs cost what, and whether we keep the program or not, obviously it's going to be up to us to decide that before we send it to the floor. And after we're done with it, budget and tax is second. But I think we're trying to avoid that very situation you raised. Senator Carrozza.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Since Tuesday is this committee's first in-person hearing this session, and it's a big bill that I'm aware that we'll have constituents who may be traveling to either testify or to observe the hearing. And knowing that we have limited capacity, what will the process be so it's fair, to those especially who have made the extra effort to travel to testify and to listen to the climate change bill hearing?
Look, we want to have enough seats for the people testifying, right? For the people, I think we said 42 will fit here. It holds 85, something like that. We'll have those seats used. Look, I'm hoping, I'm not encouraging a lot of advocates to fill this room because we're not going to allow it to be filled, or the ante-room, or the hallway behind. I actually said, look, if you want to be involved, go outside and be in Lawyer Square. So I don't have a plan for that. I want to make sure the people who testify are in the back room or here so they're ready to be called up. Look, we're still going to stream on YouTube, right? I mean, if they're not testifying personally, I would encourage them to, unless they absolutely really want to be here, to watch it on YouTube. I mean, witnesses should be, they have a process to sign up electronically or to submit testimony. That's all still in play. I mean, forget about climate bill. I mean, this is a broad issue. I mean, we're transitioning, So I don't know what to tell you. I mean, we're going to keep it very limited here. And if it gets too crowded in the hallway, I'm going to have the security move them to the marble hallway so people are spread out. I don't want this to be, you know, an event.
A super spreader.
Exactly. I don't think any of us want to be responsible for that. I mean, I support going from virtual to in-person. I find it much more valuable, and I love to see you folks, and I think I pay more attention when people are in person. I told you that. So, but I don't want to say you all come. I don't want to have 300 people. You know, God forbid we had to deal with the guns and have 400 people. I'm glad it's not us. So,
I just think given the interest in this first bill, on this bill, on the first day we're having the hearings, that there may be a lot of interest on both sides. And, you know, just thinking, knowing that that may be the case, it just, I was just trying to flag it from the standpoint of, obviously, the proponents come in and testify first and have the whole room. And then, you know, you have those who will be coming in to testify. And just so we don't have that confusion, and that those who are testifying for either position are given the same consideration by this committee.
no, the people testifying for sure. I thought you said people want to observe. I
There,
mean,
that may be the case too, but I'm thinking as far as who's in first, who's in second.
well, I haven't even decided yet, and I haven't met with committee council if we're going to take 5 or 10 from one side and 5 or 10 from the other. I don't even know how many have signed up, Senator Cruz. I don't know. And I'm not encouraging, look, I've got 6 or 8 witnesses, I think around 8, that I have planned for. And if they get 2 or 2.5 minutes, but I can't control who else is signing up. So I don't want to have 30 advocates because it will be repetitive. So I don't want to do a song and dance other than the 6 or 8 or 9 people. And we've had that on some bills already that weren't climate solutions. But in terms of observers, and I don't know if I'm going to take some and then go back and forth, or take all pro and then con, but I would be really hesitant of encouraging observers if they're not going to speak. And again, I'm not saying just for Tuesday, I'm saying for Wednesday or Thursday. Let's not overdo it. I mean, we're breaking new territory here. So I don't have a better answer than that. And if you've got some suggestions, I and Lemuria, who will be back on Monday, and all of our committee councils are all ears.
Mr. Chair, we haven't started the sign-up yet.
Monday,
We don't even know till Monday at 4.
4 p.m. and then 10 a.m.
10 a.m., right.
Yeah, sign up starts the day before.
Okay,
Okay?
well, let's talk about it when it happens.
Okay. Have a great weekend. Get some rest.